So here's an article published a few days ago in The Guardian. Quote, it's mind-blowing. US meteorologists face death threats as hurricane conspiracies surge. So what this article and several others like it are reporting is the popularization of a conspiracy theory within the far right that Democrats control the weather and are sending hurricanes toward populations, regions of the United States, like in Florida and the Carolinas, with high populations of Republicans. This theory, quote unquote, was actually promoted by Marjorie Taylor Greene, a very high profile Republican politician. And they've taken root. People believe that Democrats are controlling the weather and sending hurricanes into Republican areas. And this has real world consequences. So, for example, just today, CNN reported, quote, some FEMA operations paused in North Carolina after reports National Guard troops saw armed militia threatening them. So, FEMA is a government organization in the United States whose purpose is to go into regions that are impacted by natural disasters and help the people to recover. And here, FEMA is actually being impeded from carrying out their work by armed militias with guns who are threatening them. It is just an extraordinary situation how this degree of conspiracy theory, of absurdity, can proliferate within the mainstream of the American population, particularly on the far right. And it raises a real good question of how do people become open to such absurd conspiracy theories? Well, the short answer is you gradually acclimate in your worldview to a conspiracy mindset. And so people who have a conspiracy mindset go from one conspiracy theory to another one quite typically. So before then, it was a proliferation of conspiracies about COVID-19 vaccines and the COVID-19 virus, the pandemic. This is just an example from PBS in 2023. So the ideas that circulated around COVID-19 included that there was no pandemic, or that it was quote unquote scamdemic or a plandemic. All of this stuff that people actually it either didn't exist or it was planned, that the vaccines kill people, or that they changed your DNA, or that there was a microchip in the vaccines. All this crazy stuff. Those are conspiracy theories, and those conspiracy theories, people were developed a plausibility framework and a mindset to find them credible because they had been impacted by earlier conspiracy theories, such as the QAnon conspiracy theory, which claims that there's a worldwide cabal of powerful elites, including Hollywood people and Jews and Democrats, who are trafficking in children and killing their children and taking secretions from children in order to like achieve immortality or something. And if you look up Pizzagate online, you can learn more about that. And then, of course, before then, there was like the birther conspiracy theory that Donald Trump promoted. Of course, Trump's always been promoting these various conspiracy theories, but the birther one was that Barack Obama wasn't born in the United States. He was, in fact, born in Africa, that he's a secret Muslim as well. The point here being that you gradually will become open to more and more bizarre conspiracy theories because you have developed a conspiracy mindset that finds these plausible. So I want to consider, um, and we trace back a little further some of the cultural roots where people in North America, and particularly on the right, where conspiracy theories do tend to proliferate more, and particularly the religious right. What opened them up originally to develop a conspiracy mindset? And I'm not going to offer by any means, a comprehensive account here. Certainly, that's beyond my interest or scope or ability to do so. But I want to look at one aspect, and that's young earth creationism, but a particular kind of young earth creationism. So, first of all, young earth creationism is an interpretation of theology and biology and science generally, which developed in the early 20th century. The story of it is told very well in historian Ronald Numbers' book, The Creationists, how it arose in the 1920s when the views of Seventh-day Adventism and a Seventh-day Adventist who was also a geologist named George McCready Price. He wrote a book called, I think, The New Geology or something like that, which became very popular. And this was also right at the time of the fundamentalist controversies of the teens and 20s, which really culminated in the Scopes monkey trial in 1925. And this led to a new subculture of fundamentalism defined in large part by younger creationism taking root. And then really having a resurgence in the early 1960s with the publication of Henry Morris and John Whitcomb's book, The Genesis Flood. And then in the 1970s with Wayne Gish, who became famous as a debater for younger creationism, publishing his book, Evolution, the Fossils Say No. And in debating today, there's a term called the Gish Gallop, which is a debating technique where you raise a bunch of various issues that your opponent can't possibly all address. But you don't really defend any of them, you just kind of throw them out there. And it's kind of a way of kicking up dust in a debate, and that is goes back to Dwayne Gish. So culturally, young Earth creationism really began to become significant then. In the early 1980s, there was a Supreme Court case to get equal time for young Earth creationism in schools and so on. So that's young Earth creationism. And one of the features or challenges of young Earth creationism has always been to explain the fact that virtually all scientists accept that the Earth is 4.6 billion years old and the universe is 13.7 billion years old, and there wasn't a global flood, and biological species diversity on Earth arose through a gradual evolutionary process rather than through special creation of different kinds. How do you explain that virtually all scientists, 99% plus of scientists, accept that view rather than the young Earth creationist view? This is where we begin to move more closely into what becomes an overt conspiracy mindset. Because one explanation of that cognitive dissonance here to explain it away is to say, well, and this one has been very popular among some young creationists, it's to say, well, those people who believe in an old Earth, deny a global flood, accept evolution, they are locked in various paradigms. The idea of a paradigm as a way to interpret the history of science was really popularized in the 1960s by Thomas Kuhn in his famous book on the structure of scientific revolutions. And I mean, there's a lot in Kuhn that is insightful. It's certainly not the end all and be all of the interpretation of the history of science by any means, but there's something there where he points out that the history of science often moves in fits and starts because people become locked into a particular paradigm, a way of interpreting scientific data, and it takes an overwhelming amount often of evidence to the contrary to break them out of that paradigm and to bring about a paradigm shift in the history of science. And so, what some young Earth creationists have argued is that, well, people are just locked into a naturalistic paradigm and they're interpreting data through that paradigm. And on this account, when you think about why there's this 99% of scientists reject young Earth creationism, you can just say, well, it's part of the history of science that people become locked into a paradigm and need to be broken out of it through the accumulation of contrary data. And that's what the young Earth creationists are seeking to do. There is another approach, which takes another step further, which now brings us quite directly into the realm, the sphere of a conspiracy mindset. And that is to say, to explain the fact that 99% of scientists don't accept young Earth creationism by attributing this whole shift to evolution, to an old Earth, to an old universe, as a demonic uh, act of demonic design from the devil. So the devil is the one who's behind all of this and bringing people away from God's truth. This brings us to Answers in Genesis, which, of course, is the most well-known young Earth creationist organization today. Was founded by Ken Ham, a school teacher from Australia, and really has become part and parcel for many people in North America with young Earth creationism. I want to take a look at a tweet that was just posted today by Answers in Genesis, just as a way to think about, to frame these issues through the conspiracy mindset. So here's the tweet. It says the first lie was an attack on the authority of God's word. And in our era, it manifests as an attack which began in the late 1700s and 1800s on Genesis 1 to 11 because of the popularization of evolutionary geology and evolutionary biology. Now, this really encapsulates the mindset of Answers in Genesis and the way they explain the fact that virtually all scientists disagree with them. It's because not just because scientists are locked in a particular paradigm of interpreting data, but rather because scientists are wittingly or unwittingly part of a great lie orchestrated by the devil to discredit Christianity. This is a book that was published more than 30 years ago now by Ken Ham, The Lie, Evolution. And notice here that the theory of evolution is really brings us back to the snake in the garden, the one who begins to question what God has said. And this is then the whole mindset of young earth creationism. And this is how it moves into the space of priming people to be able to accept and find credible bizarre conspiracy theories about the world. What is a conspiracy theory? First of all, it's a theory. A theory is an explanatory framework for facts that one wants to explain. Conspiracy theory tries to explain those facts by appealing to a secret power. It could be an individual, an organization, who is acting with sinister or malevolent purposes. So the secret organization, power, person is acting with malevolent purpose. And because of that, that helps explain why this event or this state of affairs occurs. So a conspiracy theory of hurricanes hitting Florida says, well, there's this secret government power that controls the weather. It can control hurricanes. And because of that, you can now look at meteorologists and agents from FEMA and say, you are part of the problem. You are part of the conspiracy, whether wittingly or unwittingly. And so that's the mindset that you can now develop to explain why you believe hurricanes are hitting certain regions of the United States. Same thing with COVID-19 conspiracies. You can now question scientific elites, quote unquote, the World Health Organization, or in Canada, where I live, Health Canada, and so on, and say they're all part of the National Institute of Health, NIH. They're all part of a conspiracy to, harm the population and put alter their DNA or whatever. This kind of stuff, and then it goes back to all these other conspiracies, and all of that was really primed in a large part of the conservative religious population in America with the Answers in Genesis conspiracy theory that says we can explain the fact that 99% of scientists repudiate our views on the age of the earth and the universe and the whether a flood was local or global and the diversity of biological species on earth by appealing not just to the fact that they're locked into a paradigm, but the fact that since the 17th and 18th centuries, or the 18th and 19th centuries, I should say, the devil has been attempting to attack Christianity and using human individuals and institutions like natural science and various natural scientific bodies as agents to promote his demonic attack on Christianity. If you believe that, as millions of Christians in America and North America do, then it's that much easier. You are now primed to accept all of these other conspiracies, whether is a skepticism about human-induced climate change or about vaccines and pandemics, or whether it's about hurricanes hitting Florida. And so this is, I believe, at least one very significant fact, catalyst for how people are primed, particularly on the religious right, to open up to and accept conspiracy theories because they've already bought into one to interpret their understanding of the Bible and the fact that most scientists repudiate young Earth creationist views.